So today's webinar is entitled Mission Possible, Migrating to Oracle's Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service. My name is Ryan Koehler. I'm a manager with eCapital, and I'm joined also with Bob Usset, also an EPM manager here with eCapital. We are both also very strongly focused on our cloud deployments here at eCapital as well. So those of you who are not familiar with eCapital Advisors, we are based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and really focused on EPM as well as business analytics and big data. We also have an advisory services practice together, really serving over 250 different unique client bases throughout the North America region here. Here are some of our recent clients and past clients, especially around the Twin Cities here, just to kind of give you a sense of kind of our NASCAR slide here. And again, just a quick introduction for Bob and myself here, which will be kind of leading you through today's presentation. So why don't we jump right in and talk about what is the planning cloud? So, PBCS is really Oracle's state-of-the-art planning, budgeting cloud solution here, really providing you a lot of dynamic data input, dashboarding, financial reporting, as well as a lot of great features that get released on a monthly basis. So before we go into some more of the details of exactly what PBCS is, let's talk about why you would consider choosing PBCS as opposed to an on-prem solution, or potentially why you would want to choose PBCS instead of migrating to the next on-prem version. So for one, the speed to delivery is very quick as opposed to an on-prem solution, primarily because you don't have to take into account any of the back-end hardware components. And so that kind of leads to the next piece here. You never have to worry about upgrading your architecture ever again. You never have to worry about getting new servers, procuring those, testing those, having multiple environments to support. And also think about all of the different monitoring software that you would need on your on-prem roadmap. You don't have to worry about any of that here in the cloud because Oracle handles all that for you. The next piece, which is very key, is you do get the brand new features or fixes to past features where there may have potentially been some small bugs along the way. And all of that is included with your subscription. So you'd get a monthly release, basically, which we'll touch on here in a minute. But basically, you have an opportunity to test the functionality in a test environment. And then a few weeks after that's deployed, you can then actually move into your production environment, and all of those new features are ready for consumption. So you never have to worry about that 100K upgrade project ever again. You're always going to have the latest and greatest here on the cloud, which I think is a huge benefit. The next piece around why would you consider PBCS? It is compatible with virtually all different internet providers, whether it's Firefox, IE, and even Office 365. So you don't have to worry about some of those compatibility issues that you may run into today, depending on some of the versions you may be having on-prem. And finally, all of these kind of coupled together can really help decrease your annual cost as well as your monthly cost from a subscription standpoint. I think part of this that we've seen our clients do a good job of is really evaluating your current license list as well. And a lot of times we find that, maybe from an on-prem perspective, you have 250 licenses that were bundled with, your initial purchase with Oracle. In all reality, maybe you're only using 70 of those licenses. So it's kind of a one-size or more of a customized solution that can fit all organizations here. And you can certainly change those subscription models as you move forward with your partnership with Oracle. So before we jump into some of our favorite features with PBCS, I wanted to give you a kind of a snapshot of what you would expect to see on a monthly basis here. So this is kind of the cloud readiness guide that gets sent out to all subscribers on a monthly basis. And you get a nice table of contents here walking you through a variety of updates, removal of support, defect fixes, things of that nature. And then you also have a detailed description of each of these items here included. So very helpful guide. I think it's a nice little snapshot into kind of walking you through what's new with the current release. So now let's get into some of the key features with PBCS. So the ones that we're going to specifically talk about today are on this slide. So we're going to get into the Simplified interface all the way through the Exalytics Hardware here. So why don't we jump into the Simplified interface here. So this is going to be a big change for those of you who are used to an on-prem Hyperion planning implementation where you have kind of that classic view. This is the Simplified interface right here. So for some of the newer versions on-prem, you do have the option to have the Simplified interface. Although I would say it's pretty elementary. They continue to refine the Simplified interface on the cloud on a monthly basis here. And so what we've seen is basically all of the new features that get rolled out is very simplified interface focused. So we have found that our users at our clients really appreciate the simplified interface. I think it makes it more interactive, and the users kind of feel like they're using a true system as opposed to just kind of trying to find a way to make it work. So again, you can customize all of these different buttons here on your simplified interface by each individual user if you see fit as well. So just a definite improvement in kind of navigating through the application here. So the second one we're going to talk about today is the integrated reporting. So those of you who may have on-prem Hyperion Planning or Essbase today, you probably have Financial Reporting Studio as well, and know that it's kind of a separate client that you have to install on your machine for development, and it's a little clunky at times, but certainly gets the job done. On the cloud, it's all integrated into your cloud subscription. So that means a couple different things. You don't have to access it through a different application or potentially a different URL. You're accessing it directly through the simplified interface. And also the big thing here is there's no additional license costs. So today, if you're using Financial Reporting Studio, you have a separate set of licenses. You're also paying maintenance on a monthly basis or an annual basis that's separate from your Essbase or planning maintenance agreement as well. So this is all included with your PBCS subscription, which is a huge benefit here. The next component that we are certainly excited about with PBCS is the dashboarding that's available. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not an all-out BI solution like a Tableau or a Click or an OBI, but this is certainly a light dashboard that gets the job done and is actually very visually appealing. So you have a lot of flexibility here, and more importantly, I would say it's very easy to create these dashboards. So it's a lot of drag and dropping. It's pretty easy to customize, and again, I think fairly simplified users can really leverage this process, and you don't need like true development to get your dashboards up and running. And here on this slide, we just have a couple of examples of what you would expect from some of these dashboarding options here. You can also include page drop-downs on these like you would on a data form to make you very easily be able to change the context of this dashboard. So I think there's certainly design considerations that are important to take into account to leverage this functionality to the best of your ability. But I think this, coupled with some of the other features with PBCS, makes it a definite winner here. Along those same lines, predictive planning is also included in PBCS. Now, on some of the newer versions of on-prem Hyperion Planning, predictive planning is an option for you. However, you have to download the SmartView extension and then actually use it in SmartView only. There's not a web-based option. And it's definitely usable, but it's a little clunky. Certainly not as streamlined as I think we would like it to be. Now, in PBCS, you still have the option to download the predictive planning extension for SmartView. But more importantly here, you can access it through the simplified interface. And this is an example of what that looks like. And it's definitely more interactive, and I think easier to use. So if you are in any data form that's basically ready for predictive planning or valid for predictive planning, you can open up the predicting planning module on the bottom here. And this is just an example of what that kind of looks like here. So it'll take into account seasonality and trending based on your historical data set, and then take into account your predictions or your forecasts based on what data set you're analyzing. And the nice piece here is you can automatically accept like a worst case scenario, a best case scenario, and then actually paste those data values into your application. So it's kind of a more interactive way to plan. And there's some other options as far as kind of growth rate and some other kind of dashboarding there on the right. And that actually expands much, much greater than just that. So it's pretty robust, actually. We do have a webinar coming up here in the second week of November where we actually break apart predictive planning and have a whole webinar dedicated to it. Would certainly encourage anyone who's interested more in this functionality to attend that session. I think it's kind of a deep dive into the concepts of predictive planning and predictive modeling, as well as a lot of detail provided with the functionality here in PBCS itself. And the last piece here that I think is a real win here with PBCS is the concept of what hardware this is sitting on in the data center. So everything is on an Exalytics box. So this is a very high-powered server that Oracle has. It's really, the concept here is all in memory, and it's specifically made to work well with Essbase and planning. So we've seen some dramatic performance increases, while being on an Exalytics system here. And the nice piece here is, we have seen clients trying to use Exalytics on-prem, and there are certainly configuration challenges and specific configuration that you need to understand how to use in order to make that in-memory system work for you. The nice piece here is this is all in an Oracle data center, and so they have their Oracle engineers already having this tuned, and so you don't have to worry about any of that back-end configuration, and you can ensure that you're going to get the most optimized environment here to leverage this Exalytics box. So it's a great, we've seen great improvements in some situations, and certainly appreciate the Exalytics box here in PBCS. So this next piece we're going to go into, we kind of walked through some of our highlights of PBCS in general. All of these concepts and this functionality is available for both PBCS and EPBCS, being the enterprise version. We're just going to go into some of the differences or some of the additional features that come with EPBCS. So EPBCS is simply the enterprise version, and it provides you with some pre-built modules here. So initially, when EPBCS was rolled out, you basically had the financials module, the projects module, the workforce module, and the capital or CapEx module. Now, those of you who are familiar with traditional, pre-built modules on-prem, the workforce and CapEx should sound familiar to you. I will say that from what we've seen, they have done a complete rebuild of that, so it's not the same overall application as it was on-prem. And what I mean by that is I think it's a little bit easier to customize and integrate and make changes, as opposed to on-prem. It was a little bit difficult to truly adopt that for certain organizations. Now, the difference here on cloud is you also get the projects module included, as well as this financials module. So the financials module, the concept there being, basically your traditional income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow financial statements, all kind of pre-built for you. And when you're going through the design process, the end user has basically provided a wizard that you kind of go through, and it will ask you questions and kind of help you set up. Now, I will say I think it is important to understand that you do still need, a developer who knows what he or she is doing from a Hyperion planning or S-based perspective, to really fully implement this. Because let's be honest, most organizations are going to want to customize a lot of different components along the way. Now, just recently, I think this is a good showcase of just getting the latest and greatest features very easily through the monthly deployments. The strategic modeling module was introduced, I believe it was 3 months ago, and this is basically replacing the legacy Hyperion strategic finance on-prem tool in a much more streamlined approach here on the cloud. So we now basically, EPBCS, you get the projects, the financials, the workforce, the CapEx, and the strat modeling, all in one tool set. Now, I will say there are some things that I think are important to consider when you're trying to determine whether or not you want to select PBCS or EPBCS. Again, overall, the products are the same. The underlying products are. It's just really what you are trying to accomplish with your organization. And again, if you want to leverage those pre-built modules, EPBCS is a great fit. And I think the best way that I look at it is if you don't have a very robust workforce or CapEx module today or application today, and you're looking for kind of a defined process to get your organization started, I think this is a great fit. If you have a very, very complex CapEx solution today, I think it's important to evaluate some of the options before just jumping right into EPBCS, as in some cases, potentially PBCS might be your best option. But overall, the nice thing with both PBCS and EPBCS is you will continue to get those updates automatically pushed to your environment, regardless of what decision you make there. The other thing here, too, is just around overall cost of the subscriptions. So EPBCS, as far as the advertised list price, is more expensive on a monthly basis than PBCS. However, like any Oracle product, you can always partner with your Oracle rep and certainly negotiate, length of subscriptions, amount of users that you need to subscribe as far as licenses to help bring down those costs. So we have certainly seen situations where that has happened. So don't just take that list price, as the gospel there. There's certainly room for negotiations like there is with any software deal. And the last piece here around this, which I think is important to understand, is you don't have to decide this now. So if you know that your organization wants to move to the cloud because you see the benefits of the cost savings and the ability to be more nimble month to month, you can always go to PBCS now. And if you choose to want to go to EPBCS at a future time, say when your organization does want to explore CapEx or workforce, you can certainly upgrade that subscription model really at any point in time, and your Oracle rep can certainly help you with that too. So, that's really kind of covering the first piece of this presentation. I'm going to pass it on to Bob now, and he's going to walk us through some of the migration strategy and considerations there.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so Ryan took some time today to kind of describe some of the features of PBCS and some of the differences between the enterprise and your standard model that you can deploy here. For the back half of the presentation here, we are just going to talk about migration strategy. So some of these will be points if you're coming from on-prem into PBCS. Some of them will work whether or not some of these topics are valid, whether or not you have on-prem planning today or not. And then finally, we'll talk about processes that we at eCapital have went through to actually execute a migration into PBCS. So the first thing that we want to do from a migration strategy is we want to consolidate our applications wherever possible. And excuse me, this hasn't always been an approach that places have taken on-prem. We often see situations where implementations will contain multiple applications with a single plan type, whereas it could have very easily been done in a single application with multiple plan types under that one application. Within PBCS, so within that subscription, you are going to get one application as part of that subscription fee, and you can fill up to 3 planning plan types, and you will have 4 ASO reporting plan types. And once those are full, from your standard subscription standpoint, the only way to obtain more applications or databases to store data, run your calculations, is going to be to acquire new subscriptions. And even if that's the same user in application A and application B, you are going to be paying dual, a dual license fee for that person. So again, consolidating those applications down into one are really going to simplify, direct impact on the amount you're going to pay from a monthly subscription standpoint. The other things that are important as well is data movement between your applications or between plan types is going to be easier than data movement between separate applications. Since these applications are technically, they're completely separate applications, they don't really know that one another exists at all. So to move data between those is going to be much more complicated. We'll get into that in a little more detail. It'll probably require additional tools that you'll need to purchase to kind of pass that data back and forth. Excuse me, you can definitely do it without that, using file transfers, but overall that process is just going to be a lot more complicated. And even the process for our end users to log into the application. So again, if we have multiple applications, they'll technically be 2 different URLs that users will need to hit to log into that application. I say that with a caveat. Over the last month, actually in the last release, Oracle came out with an enhancement that's trying to reduce that, the siloed impact of multiple applications. So there may be a change in the future, but as of right now, even your login process can be complicated. Excuse me again. So, and a lot of times we see these multiple applications, and the reason for them was mostly from a performance standpoint. Keeping those applications, especially from a planning where you're running calculations, different things like that when you're inputting data. You want to keep that application lean and mean as much as possible. But in PBCS with that Exalytics backend, there's a less of a reliance on that. Just with the performance improvements we have seen, you can grow those applications and make them bigger than historically they may have been in the past. So the next thing we need to think about for migration strategy is we need to understand the new features that are available in PBCS. The biggest reason for that is some of these features can only be enabled when the application is created. So an example of a feature for that could be something like sandboxing. This is a feature that when you are creating the application, you're going through the GUI to create that application on your initial login to the system. You have to check that box to say, yes, I am going to use sandboxing. And if you don't do that, your opportunity for leveraging that feature, it's going to become complicated. Basically, if you want to enable that in the future, there's no real great workaround. You almost have to back up your application, delete, recreate, enabling that functionality, and then try to bring in objects from a backup. So we want to avoid that wherever possible. So understanding all these features, making informed decisions on the creation of these applications is really important from a migration strategy to PBCS. On top of that, there are other features, such as the one Ryan talked about today with that predictive planning, where certain objects need to be configured a certain way to leverage it fully. So, sticking with our predictive planning example, the way a web form is laid out and that design of that web form, the usability of predictive planning in that data input process can be vastly changed depending on how you have that laid out. So again, while you can leverage these features in the future, there may be requirements on your end to kind of go through and tweak some of those, whether they be data forms, whether they be reports, whether it be something from a security standpoint, but they're just very specific features that will require a more predefined way that you're going to lay out certain objects in your application. So again, understanding those new features and enabling them on application creation or incorporating them as you're designing your solution can be critical to ensure a smooth migration into PBCS. And then finally, the last thing to think about here, especially, and this is more so for people that are coming from on-prem planning, but we need to understand retired functionality. So for the most part, everything from on-prem into PBCS is there in some way, shape, or form. The backbone of this application, the structure of what it is, really has not changed much from on-prem and into the cloud. You still have all the things that you're looking for from planning, from comprehensive data input processes through web forms, ability to fire calculations to help complete budget and forecast cycles. All of those basic things are the same, but there are small things that are going to be different between on-prem and PBCS. And the biggest area where those are going to be different is going to be with data integration into the models. So for those of us with on-prem, SQL load rules, that's a common method we'll use to actually load data into the application. We don't have that in PBCS going forward. Our ability to update metadata using EPMA, ODI, the outline planning utility, once again, those are all no longer available as part of PBCS. So those have been replaced with tools such as data management for a data loading process, been replaced with EPMA for updating, or I'm sorry, not EPMA, EPM Automate for updating metadata. So while the functionality is different, you're still going to retain all of those type of things today. It's just going to be done slightly differently. So learning through that implementation and understanding how you may have to incorporate data sources into your system is definitely something that we want to think about when we're migrating into PBCS. And we have future slides here where we're going to touch on some of these options that we use to integrate metadata and data. We will also cover those today as well. So once we really define that migration strategy, what we're going to do to create and build and design our application in PBCS, we need to actually execute on that migration. So a big point that I like to try to communicate with our clients when we're getting them going to PBCS is we really need to use this migration into PBCS as a learning opportunity. So that could be true for those of us that have no on-prem planning experience, but even those of us that are coming from on-prem into PBCS, well, the functionality is nearly the same in a lot of ways. The ways that you are going to interact with the screens to execute certain things is very different. So Ryan was talking about earlier the simplified interface and this way that end users and even administrators interact with the tool, totally different from a lot of our implementations that we are coming from on-prem. We want to use this as a learning opportunity because after we go live, what eCapital likes to do from an implementation standpoint, just from a cost-saving perspective, so we want to ensure you are enabled to maintain, support, and even do enhancements to your system without having to call us for everything that's required. So really using it as a learning opportunity is key. Oracle has something that's accessible from the simplified interface. It's simply called Academy, and it's actually a really great tool. It gives great how-to documentation from a tech standpoint. They also have lots of videos out there. So how to update metadata in your application, how to refresh the application after maybe metadata has been updated. They have lots of great videos out there to learn from. But something I also recommend before we get going on a PBCS implementation is I strongly recommend taking some type of formalized training. So, Oracle has formalized training from a PBCS. eCapital, we have a training that we have implemented and given in the past. And by doing that, we're going to bring up everyone that's working on that project. We're going to bring their knowledge of PBCS up right at the start of that project. So then as we're going through and we're doing more detailed things, we can focus on knowledge transfer of more complex topics and not have to focus on minor things that could come up from, just everyday build of an application. So again, we strongly recommend learning and possibly hitting training before we actually even begin to build in PBCS. So another big thing from a migration standpoint for those of us that are on-prem is you can migrate your existing on-prem objects into PBCS using LCM. So LCM is simply, it's called lifecycle management. It's simply that tool that we use to back up our applications. So whether that be a web form that's used to load data, a business rule that's used to calculate on when users submit data, and these all export into basically XML files, some files that can then just be simply moved over into your PBCS cloud environment and re-imported to be recreated. So that is available for those of us that are in 11.1.2.3 and higher. For those of us that are in, say, 11.1.2.1, 11.1.2.2, you are not going to be able to take your LCMs directly from your environment into PBCS. With that being said, eCapital Advisors has access to all the different versions of the different versions of planning and Essbase out there. So we've developed approaches, whether that be scripts that will automatically go through and scrub some of those XMLs that are created to then allow them to be imported into PBCS. So we definitely have workarounds. So even you as an organization that is on a lower version, just realize that we at eCapital, we do have some workarounds. We do have some processes that can still allow us to leverage LCM. So if you are coming from on-prem, it's important to note a lot of the things you're going to do or that you have today on-prem will not necessarily need to be recreated, but a lot of it will be able to just simply import it through an LCM process. So with that being said, not everything is going to migrate from LCM into the application. There are some things that we found, even if you are coming from 11.1.2.3, that just don't tend to import cleanly. And one of these is actually security. So within security, within PBCS, the security itself is somewhat different from it is on-prem. The way you would create users in the application is different. The way you assign users roles within the application is different. So just because of some of those differences in security from on-prem and PBCS, we found that that's not necessarily going to migrate properly with LCM. So security is just one example. Other areas where we've seen that is in the FR reporting. So again, as Ryan has talked about, there's some changes in the financial reporting studio when they integrated into PBCS, and some of those changes, again, have an impact on reports. It's not across the board as much as it is with security. It's almost safe to assume that you're going to be able to import very little from a security standpoint within the FR and those reports that are created. Some of those are going to import, but anything that has complex, maybe formulas defined in the reports, complex formatting, things like that, those reports are not going to import cleanly, and there's going to be work on the back end to account for that. Another thing with security I should also call out is within security, there is the ability to set up SAML integration with your on-prem AD systems. So you do have an ability, and this is different than how it is on-prem as well, but there should be some setup to kind of, if you want to integrate your AD systems in the system. So again, users' username and password, those are all maintained, in your system that's maintaining them today, basically to log into their workstations. You can incorporate that into PBCS. It's a pretty simple process. We've incorporated it on a couple clients here, several clients. And for the most part, PBCS will generate a file that you can then just give to your networking IT group, and it's a pretty standard cloud integration process to that. But just wanted to call out, in conjunction with that other point, not everything is going to come in from an LCM for those of us that are on-prem. So we do need to be ready in that execution to plan for some time to possibly manually recreate some of those objects that are not going to come in. And finally, as promised, talking about this, so again, the functionality between on-prem and PBCS from a planning standpoint, very similar. Again, the biggest differences are your data and metadata integrations. So again, our SQL load rules do not exist anymore. EPM does not exist anymore. Essbase Reporting Studio, if we're using that to update metadata, doesn't interact with PBCS. So we have to plan for this, and one of the biggest impacts moving to PBCS is really that data integration. How are you going to feed your metadata? How are you going to feed your data into your application? And it's a very critical step when we're executing that migration. So I want to take some time here to discuss what those things look like. So a lot like with on-prem, you can still manually load data and metadata into the system using flat files. So we can get these column export data sets, whether that be for metadata or data. Obviously, we're going to have very predetermined headers that are going to be required in these files. Once we get those files into the correct format with the correct headers and the correct orders, we can then leverage the simplified interface to simply upload those in a manual load and export process. So, probably the easiest solution, almost always the solution we as eCapital at least initially work with, just if nothing else to ensure that the files that are coming out of our source systems can be interacted within the system. And it's almost like a good way to just simply test. So almost just manually upload those. So those manual uploads technically can be scheduled through the simplified interface. There's definite restrictions in that. The biggest one being it's really the scheduler is only contained to time. So you can say, I want this metadata update process to run at midnight, but it's not going to be able to check some external system to say, did the file get created before I run? So again, there is some opportunities for automation through this. but it really shouldn't be leveraged that way. I mean, for the most part, it's just going to be used for any ad hoc type setups, testing of files that could possibly be coming from source systems and things of that nature. The ability to actually automate data and metadata uploads is generally done more through EPM Automate. So EPM Automate is really a great tool for scheduling these upload processes. So an example of how we would use this is we have a metadata file that's coming from our source system, and we've tested it through our manual upload process, and we know that it's correctly updating our dimensionality as needed. We can then leverage EPM Automate to schedule that tool. So EPM Automate is a command-based utility. So that's one of the biggest downfalls to EPM Automate. It is 100% command line driven, no GUI, no interface to tell you how to enter your commands or anything. We can see up in here the login command. This is how you'd have to type it into a command window. EPM Automate, login, enter your username, password, URL, and your identity domain. Well, that's not necessarily fun for a lot of people that have to administer these applications. So really these are leveraged through automation scripting. And this can be run on a Windows server or a Linux server. They have both options out there. This is a very easy download. It's a very small package overall. You download it from your Simplified interface to simply get in your environment, and you're basically up and running at this point. So again, this is a great tool for scheduling your data and metadata loads. Not necessarily the funnest tool for administrators to have to work with on a day-to-day basis, simply because, again, you're working from a command line instead of a GUI, which is how most of us like to interact with our applications on a day-to-day basis. The next piece here is data management. So this is, once again, a free with your subscription to PBCS. And basically what this gives you, for those of us that are familiar with FDMEE, and we'll cover this in the next slide here, it's basically a very skinny down version of FDMEE. So you're going to be able to work with files that have been uploaded into your cloud domain to load in your application. And really the most powerful piece of this tool is that you're able to create mappings with this. So if you have data coming from a source system that maybe one field contains multiple dimensions in your planning application, you're going to be able to leverage this tool to break that out, to map your data accordingly into your application, or even vice versa. If you have multiple columns with different data definitions that are technically going to be one dimension in your application, you're going to be able to leverage this as a very powerful mapping tool to help facilitate data from your interfaces into your PBCS application. So again, some of the bigger downfalls with this is really the data has to be uploaded in a flat file format into your identity domain. So you're not going to be able to hook into a SQL database table and have this be that conduit to move between the two. You would have to take that data out of the SQL relational database, put it in a file format, upload it into your PBCS domain, upload it so your application realizes that it exists, basically, and then you'd be able to use this to map it in. So there's definitely, some issues that this has, or some challenges that we will face by leveraging this tool. But a big benefit, again, all the mapping, it's free to use, part of your subscription to leverage as you see fit. The last one that we'll cover here from an integration standpoint is FDMEE. So right off the bat, the biggest downfall of FDMEE, and really the only downfall if you think about it, is the fact that it is a separate license to own. So you do not get FDMEE as part of your PBCS subscription. It's a totally separate product that you need to purchase and subscribe to. But if you do that, the world is your oyster, basically. So you have data that's sitting in SQL relational tables on-prem. You have flat files that are sitting on-prem. Those can be loaded directly from there into PBCS. If you want to connect, one PBCS application to another PBCS application. So, in the examples we talked about earlier, how we want to consolidate applications wherever possible, it just doesn't work in your environment. You have to have multiple applications. You'd be able to seamlessly connect both of those applications using FDMEE. So really, FDMEE is considered the central part of that wheel that is all Oracle's products. And basically, Oracle's model when it comes to FDMEE is any source, any target. So if you have data going somewhere and you need it to go somewhere else, FDMEE is going to be able to do that from a tool standpoint. FDMEE also has the powerful mapping processes that we talked about before. So again, if your data doesn't fit perfectly into what your planning application is going to look like, FDMEE can be that conduit to remap it as needed, break it apart as needed, but basically help you to shape that data to fit your application that fits your planning process. So big thing to remember with FDMEE, from a positive side, any source, any target, it's going to be able to move data anywhere throughout your Oracle environment and beyond. It has an incredibly powerful mapping engine to help us get data into our systems. And again, really the downside to FDMEE is it is a separate subscription, and on top of that, it is not a cloud offering. So Oracle does not offer it as a cloud product. So as we try to move away from on-prem and having that on-prem footprint, we may have to look to other opportunities to leverage that, as Oracle does not offer it as a cloud offering. So that sums up the different integration changes as we move from on-prem into PBCS. Kind of wrap up our presentation today, the content we have before we get into questions. I wanted to also let the group know Ryan and myself do monthly update webinars within PBCS. So Ryan had put up on the screen, what's new in October. What Ryan and myself will do is we will go through each one of those bullets and try to provide some additional insight into what's going to be changed. Oftentimes what Oracle will give us is a very high-level overview. There's times when you could get done reading the blurb about what's going in for that specific feature, and you may still be scratching your head saying, I really don't know how this is going to impact my application or my process. Ryan and I have these webinars monthly to help describe these features in more detail, give examples of where it may be impacting you and your environment. We basically do that on a monthly basis, essentially to help keep you informed and up to date as far as what's coming into your environment from a release standpoint. So there's a URL out there. If you want to subscribe to this monthly series, you'll just get an email updating you when the next one will be. You can also just go to this URL if you want to look up things that have been coming through in the past. We have saved all of our videos up there. We've been doing this for over a year now, so you should have over a year's worth of videos to go through. And even if you want to get a flavor for what type of updates have been coming in from a PBCS standpoint, you can watch some of these videos to get a feel for what that would look like. Again, the most important thing that we try to help with is to try to inform you what's coming in from a change standpoint. We want to make sure you're informed. Change is always a little scary for a lot of organizations out there. We want to try to help avoid as much change and unknown as possible. Last thing we'll call out here, very pertinent for the conversation we've had today, is Meredith Corporation. They're located down in Des Moines, Iowa. They have went through this process with us. So we had a project with them where we not only migrated an on-prem into PBCS, but we also created a net new application in PBCS as well. So really, we've done it all on this client. We basically have their testimonial for how their experience was with eCapital, how their experience was in the tool. So again, if you go to this web page here we have on the slide, you will be able to get some feedback from the actual users and even the owners of the application about how that project went. There's also a short video you can watch to give an overview of the project. We just wanted to let the group know that there are success stories out there, definite things that we could leverage going into our projects. So with that, looks like we have a couple questions that rolled through. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to read and take this first one here, or?
Yeah, sure. So it looks like the first question is, have you ever seen successfully negotiated cloud prices with any clients that we've worked with? I can take this one. So we actually have multiple times, actually. I would say I can't recall a time we've had a client that's done a cloud implementation where we haven't seen some sort of discount from Oracle. And that's both whether it's EPBCS or PBCS. I would say definitely worth asking the questions with your Oracle rep. We've seen EPBCS licenses definitely negotiate down quite a bit. So definitely a good tactic there.
Yeah, I would add to that, everything with Oracle is negotiable from a licensing standpoint. I would also say that if you are serious about looking into PBCS as an option, Oracle reps are very hungry right now. They're looking to make deals. And especially if you're looking to get in even Q4, which I know would be quick turnaround for those of us that are new, but possibly even in Q1 when they're looking to start the year off on a good note. At the end of the day, working with those reps, getting the personality, they're hungry right now. So I would strongly recommend, if you are thinking about it, to start working with an Oracle rep and getting some prices out there, because this really is the time to buy here.
So Bob, maybe you can take this one here, but another question we have is, what is done if bugs are found in any of the monthly releases?
Yeah, so I mean, it's bound to happen. There are going to be certain bugs that come out from a monthly release standpoint. So I think this goes hand in hand with the webinars that I was talking about that Ryan and I do. So you know, we're looking for those bugs on a monthly basis. We're trying to get out in front of that, trying to get you workarounds, different things like that. And at the end of the day, you likely will only have to wait a month if a bug does come out, because they're going to look to patch it next month. But if we do uncover, or if you as an organization uncover a bug in the monthly release, you can hold that release from going into your production environment. So you know, you can hold it. Generally, Oracle is not going to want to let you hold it for more than a month. They want to do their best to get everyone on a common version. You know, just from their own support cost standpoint, it's easier if everyone's on the same version. But you can technically hold that monthly release, you know, and that could be for a couple of reasons. So Ryan and I have actually tested this just to see what Oracle's feedback would be. But we pretended that, you know, we're in a tight closed cycle and we don't want to introduce risk to our environment. So we don't think there's anything wrong with the release. We don't care. We just don't want it to go in. And we've actually even been successful to essentially hold that off from Oracle applying that release as well. So I know that Ryan and I often get questions around release cycles, and whether that be fear or just questions in general around, you know, I'm not used to monthly releases into a planning and budgeting, you know, software. I'm not comfortable with that. Just realize that in general, the releases that are coming out, very minor overall. We've yet to see, outside of like a predictive planning or a strategic modeling, anything major being introduced into the environment. So they're generally very minor overall. And again, we will help you mitigate any risk around that by checking things internally. You know, we have a pulse on all of our different clients that are in the cloud. So if anyone realizes any issues throughout a release, we are quick to provide that information to all of our other client bases, almost like you know, bring as many minds together as possible to get in front of it. But at the end of the day, if all else fails, you do always have the opportunity to hold that release if there is a show-stopping type bug.
Yeah, and I would add to that just real quick. I don't think we've ever seen any real issues with the monthly release that I would consider like a showstopper, right? I think we did one time see Oracle get ahead of this and found something that actually did potentially cause some larger issues to the SmartView Excel add-in, and they actually stepped in and held the release for a month. I believe that was last December. So if they get ahead of it, they will kind of manage that process as well. So I don't know, I think we got one more question here. I don't know, Bob, if you want to handle this one too. The question is, do you have an example where performance was better in the cloud than on-prem?
Yeah, so we definitely have seen that. So again, you know, hitting points we kind of talked about earlier. Ryan had talked about that Exalytics backend. You know, you're sitting on that Exalytics hardware, essentially created for planning in that space, configured by Oracle technicians, maintained by Oracle technicians. So that alone is going to be an opportunity to see a performance improvement. So, you know, to be quite honest, we see implementations that are done on servers that almost feel like they're just sitting under someone's desk in the office, not tuned correctly, not configured properly, and that's not a recipe for success from a backbone and setting your application up on the hardware that it needs. So that alone has been we've seen great performance improvements around that. So even in the Meredith application that we have that case study on, you know, we do an operational model, so we're outside of finance even. We're within a model that has, you know, extremely complex calculation, multiple data inputs, you know, multiple, you know, very detailed analytic reporting requirements. And it's something that may have been challenging on-prem given the dimensionality and the data volume and the things that we were working with. And the application was really humming in PBCS. So we've definitely seen vast improvements coming from on-prem into PBCS, and really only expect greater things going forward as we get monthly releases into the environments.
Doesn't look like there's any other questions at this time. So, you know, again, we appreciate everybody spending the time out of their day to attend today's session. Strongly encourage you to check out some of the other webinars that we're holding here in the next few months, and certainly encourage you to subscribe and check out our monthly webinars if you are more interested in PBCS.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is definitely check out our webinars. You know, we will normally keep them to an hour or less. This is actually one of our longer running webinars. We're actually almost going to take a full hour here. Generally, we'll get you all the information in 30 to 45 minutes. Would also like to call out that we are hosting an event here at eCapital where you can get hands-on exposure to this tool. So we're actually going to put a workstation in front of you. You get to log into the application. You can load data into a web form. You can feel the calculations running. making your calculated inputs, and you can actually run some dashboards or reporting out the back end. So really give you a end-to-end feel what your end users are going to have. Again, it could just be a great way to understand the functionality that's available in PBCS and really help you formulate any questions that maybe pertain to your organization. So if you have any questions on that or any other events that eCapital is looking to hold, any other questions in general, do not hesitate. Ryan and I are happy to answer and help with any questions you might have. So with that, we will cut everyone loose. Thank you for your time.